Tonight, I am going to be talking about the third foundation of mindfulness of mind. And we begin this by contemplating the mind. What is mind? We want to investigate, is there a self? Is there an ego? And what are the characteristics of this self? Is it permanent? Is it independent? Is it unique? In our investigations, we want to find and remove any false assumptions that we have made about our mind and ourselves. We need to change. We need to let go of false beliefs about reality. You could say we need to realign our way of thinking, our way of seeing the world. So here are some questions or areas to look into. First of all, what is the mind? Is the mind consciousness? Is it the content, the thoughts, the experiences? Is the mind solid? Is it made out of substances? What is it? And finally, does it exist? Another area to look into is, are the mind and the body the same, or are they different? If you are in an accident and say you lose an arm, does that change your mind? Is it the same mind that you had before the accident? Then, when you're investigating this self, where is the self? Is it in your body? Is it directly related to your body? Is it not related to your body? And then finally, is the mind a self? Ordinarily, we have quick answers to these questions, and we don't really investigate these very thoroughly. It reminds me of a teaching that I went to many years ago. When it came to the question and answers, Rinpoche was asked, do we have a soul? And the translator, who happened to be Canadian and understood English very well, but he also understands Tibetan very well, asked the question in Tibetan. He was a translator. And after asking the question, the Rinpoche then had quite a conversation with the translator. I did not understand many words that were being said, but then after a while, the translator responded, and then the Rinpoche responded in Tibetan again. Then the translator responded in Tibetan, and then finally, the Rinpoche responded in Tibetan. And after about 3 or 4 minutes of this, the translator faced the audience, and his answer to, do we have a soul, was very simple. No. But it took all of this back and forth to explain to the Rinpoche what kind of baggage us Americans or Westerners have attached to this idea of a soul, which would be, of course, that it's permanent, that it is unique, it is unchanging, and that there's something solid about it, that it just goes on and on forever. So this would be the standard Buddhist answer to, do we have a soul or do we have a self? But we have to investigate and decide on our own. This isn't about, well, okay, that's what they say, so that's the way it is, and then go on behaving as if you do have a self and that your mind is solid and unchanging and so forth. Even if we can't find anything, we are habituated to believing that we have one, whether it be a soul, a mind that is solid, perhaps located in the brain somewhere, or perhaps is the brain. And an intellectual understanding will not remove this confusion. Here is a quote from Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. The initial steps of understanding impermanence, detaching from the body and realizing that there is no solid self, will help uproot confusion. If these steps are applied in conjunction with meditation practice, end quote. So these contemplations are very helpful. And after contemplating them, then you sit and do meditation, shamatha meditation. Just let the mind settle. When thoughts come up, come back to the breath, let the mind settle. And so what you have is a combination of analytical or vipassana meditation followed by shamatha meditation. It's good to actually begin with shamatha meditation, then do the vipassana, and then again more shamatha. The shamatha meditation gives the mind stability. It keeps it from jumping around. And so meditation here means more than shamatha meditation. It means to contemplate and then meditate on non-referential awareness. As your shamatha meditation practice progresses over time, you're able to maintain the mental stability without having a reference for your awareness. You don't even need to follow the breath. You don't need to count the breaths, that you can just rest in this non-referential awareness. Sometimes it's called open awareness. So meditation here, this type of non-referential awareness means knowing and being in a state free from the mental afflictions. This is a natural state, and this will automatically lead to becoming naturally gentle and kind. Now, I'm going to go through different levels here, like I have with the previous mindfulnesses. To start out with is the Hinayana, or the foundation level. And this includes the 6 consciousnesses. 1 through 5 are our sense consciousnesses: smell, taste, hearing, sight, and touch. The 6th consciousness is the mind consciousness. This mind consciousness takes information from the 5 sense consciousnesses and then brings with it kinds of thoughts, values, habitual patterns, and then projects on what the 5 sense consciousness, the input from the 5 sense consciousnesses. So the remedy for this is to develop wholesome, positive conduct and attitude. In other words, our mental consciousness, this 6th consciousness, is ruled by habitual patterns and karma. And therefore, we need to develop discipline, particularly external discipline, and having a positive attitude. The idea is the afflictive states of mind, desire, irritation and anger and hostility, confusion, denial. All of these are a result of habitual patterns, and our habitual patterns are very strong. And so we look at external situations that could bring up these strong habitual patterns as being stronger than our inner discipline. It's like you're walking down the street and you see a foe and you know he is stronger than you. And so rather than running into him on the street, you cross the street and go in a different direction. So this is how, at the foundation level, you engage in external conduct. You avoid situations that bring up desire. You avoid situations that bring up anger and so forth. Now, on the Mahayana level, we add 2 more consciousnesses. We've got the 6 that I just talked about, and you have the 7th, which is sometimes called the consciousness of wrong belief, because it's based on the basic ignorance of ego fixation. this very strong fixation that I exist. And then the eighth consciousness is called the storehouse consciousness. This might not be a close analogy, but I like to think about it as being like the hard drive on your computer. This is where we store everything. We store our memories, we store our karma, our habitual patterns, and so forth. Now, these two consciousnesses, the seventh and the eighth, are separated for purposes to intellectually investigate mind. It isn't that they are physically in two different places. They are different in some way or another, but it's just ways to analyze and look at our consciousness or our mind. Here is a quote about the seventh consciousness by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. Fixating on the idea or belief as real and true and not having the willingness to be open to other ideas or change your point of view is known as the Kleshas consciousness of wrong belief. So this wrong belief in an existent self causes us to be under the influence of kleshas, which are afflictive states of mind. The word klesha is Sanskrit for poison, and sometimes it's translated poisons of the mind. And the reason why that term is used is because they poison our mind, close our mind down, and we start seeing things from a very distorted viewpoint. And this causes us to engage in actions of body, speech, and mind that create karma, and then that karma accumulates, and this leads to rebirth in the six realms after we die. It's problematical, to say the least. Now, on the other hand, the positive qualities of our mind are always there. They're just covered up and not recognized. Our mind has the capacity for tremendous confidence. You could call it primordial confidence. Our mind has great diligence. We also have mindfulness, and all of these help us learn the Dharma and practice and doing other things that lead to weakening these afflictive states of mind. As that happens, the conditions become ripe for experiencing wisdom. And in this case, I am defining wisdom as prajna. And what that means is this is wisdom that you gain by understanding the way things are. The other type of wisdom is jnana, Jnana, which means primordial wisdom, which we have had from the beginningless beginning, and you don't develop it, you just experience it. But this prajna is something that you develop. Now, this eighth consciousness is the ground consciousness, or in Sanskrit, the alaya, Alaya. And this is a confused consciousness. As I said, this is the storehouse for karma, our habitual patterns, our memories, and so on and so forth. There is another consciousness that is called the wisdom consciousness, or the wisdom alaya consciousness. This is our Buddha nature. This is where all our enlightened qualities are. As I said, the alaya of confused consciousness is like a hard drive. And when the situation arises, our mind consciousness retrieves the memory, the habitual pattern, the judgments, concepts, and so forth, and uses them. So what we need to do is purify this confused eighth consciousness. Also, that confused eighth consciousness contains a lot of karma that we have accumulated from past lives. So now the remedy in the Mahayana path is to, first of all, rest in open awareness, this natural state. This helps cut through thinking that our experience is solid and concrete. It is also good to do this analytical examination and meditation about, do we have a self? Where is it? What does it look like? And so on. Where is our mind? Is it inside the body? Is it outside the body? Is it in the brain? So investigating and then resting in this open awareness. The other part of Mahayana is bodhicitta, and this simply means enlightened or awakened mind. And so we develop this motivation to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, that we have the motivation to develop loving kindness and compassion for all sentient beings. This is very important. On top of that, there are specific remedies for these afflictive states of mind. So for jealousy, very simply, learn to love all sentient beings equally. This is not an all or nothing situation. We already love some sentient beings. It might be a family member, it might be a child, it might be a pet. But if we can learn to broaden that love to more beings, even if it's a few more beings, we're going in the right direction. Because if we love someone, how can we be jealous when they're experiencing happiness? Because love is wanting a person to be happy. The remedy for anger is compassion. When you are feeling compassion, you want another person to be free of suffering and pain. So if you have compassion for somebody, you won't want to hurt them. And if anger suddenly arises, if you have some mental stability very quickly, you will realize that your anger is contrary to your true feelings about that person. Now, greed is the next one. Greed is based on our fear of losing our well-being. So we need to let go of seeking our own happiness and being willing to undergo hardship to provide for the happiness of other people. Again, this is related to developing bodhicitta. The next is pride. Pride, of course, is thinking that you are better than other people, that you are more important than other people, or at least one other person, the person that's in the room there with you. So bodhisattvas see others as more important than themselves. When we generate this bodhicitta motivation, part of it is becoming willing to undergo hardship to provide the happiness for the happiness of others. Another problem that needs to be worked with is ego clinging. And as soon as we become concerned for other people, our ego clinging diminishes. The more we think about others, the less we think about ourselves. It's really quite simple. There actually was an experiment that was done. It may have been replicated, in fact, but it was very simple. You had two groups of people, and both groups were given a test for happiness. And then one group was given $100, and the instructions were, you have to spend this on yourself. And when it's spent, come back here and we're going to give you another test. The other group was given $100, and their instructions were, you have to spend this on somebody else. And when you're finished spending it, come back and we'll give you a happiness test. And the results of the tests came back that the people that spent the money on other people were happier than the people that spent the money on themselves. The point is that the more concerned we are for ourselves, the less happiness we have, because the more we think about what we don't have, and we think more and more and more about ourselves. So just by thinking about other people reduces a lot of discomfort and stress. The next problem that needs to be remedied and can be remedied is what is called wrong view. And there are two that I'm going to talk about. The first is eternalism. And this is this idea of permanence, that we somehow or another seem to feel that there's something about us that is permanent and independent and not really influenced by outside forces, no matter what. And there is one way to break this down, and this is a classical Buddhist way of doing this, and that is to examine the body and realize that the body is made out of smaller and smaller parts. And the parts consist of, again, smaller parts. For instance, our body is made out of hands, fingers, arms, head, eyes, tongue, bones, and then you get down to smaller parts, tissue, sinew, pus, blood, all kinds of things, muscle tissue, and within the tissue are smaller parts. And classically, the philosophers would say that an atom is a particle that has no top, bottom, or sides. Anything that has a top, bottom, or sides has parts. So they came up with this idea. I don't know what the Sanskrit word is, but it was that you could divide substance into a part that was so small that it did not have parts. Now, here in the West, we have modern science that took that to a whole new level. Then they discovered that they were atoms, and then there were subatomic particles. And then they came up with quantum physics, which realized that these really small subatomic particles had no location. You could only talk about probability of where they existed. And then you came up with string theory and on and on and on. And the bottom line is, to the best of my understanding, is there is no such thing as solid matter. So there is nothing solid. There's nothing that is independent in our body. And as for our minds, well, again, just using Western science, you have the way an infant relates. And then you have psychology for toddlers. And then you have a psychology for children. And then there's teenage psychology. And then there is psychology for adults. Then there's midlife crisis psychology. And then you get to psychology for retired people, geriatrics, hospice psychology, and on and on and on. If there was something in our minds that was solid and unchanging, you'd only need one kind of psychology, and that would cover everybody. When it gets right down to it, we are very, very complicated. Now, the next talks a little bit about karma here. Oh, I didn't talk about nihilism. And nihilism is that, well, it doesn't matter. It's insubstantial. It doesn't matter. Nothing exists. Therefore, what the heck? So we have to realize that, well, things might not be the way they appear. If you go out on an interstate highway with your body that has no existence on a highway that has no existence, a car that has, or maybe even an 18-wheeler that has no existence will hit you, and you will experience a lot of non-existent suffering, and you will experience a non-existent death. So we have to take into consideration that things appear a certain way and follow a very logical cause and effect pattern. And this is what karma means. Karma literally means cause and effect. So we need to use some wisdom to realize that nothing is permanent and independent. There still is the law of cause and effect. So we need on the Mahayana level to apply wisdom, diligence, compassion, and loving kindness if we are to have a better future. To sum it all up, we need to uproot these afflictive states of mind by developing good qualities, and this will naturally remove our negative characteristics. Non-distraction is a very important quality to develop, and it can only be developed through meditation. And this non-distraction keeps us from being controlled by the afflictive states of mind, and it leads to the experience of non-conceptuality. Now, the final way to look at this mindfulness of mind is through Vajrayana. And this perspective is that it is our minds that experience samsara and nirvana. And our experience depends on the orientation of our mind, not external circumstances. Here is a quote from Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. The experience of samsara and nirvana are within your mind, and your experience is based upon whether you turn your mind towards the distraction of experiencing the afflictive states of mind or toward the ultimate nature of mind, in which there is the experience of every kind of wisdom. End quote. So the ultimate nature of mind is unchanging wisdom.